let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We have a
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
actually,
in importance of
what
is that process that a developer, or let's say
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am co-host Andrew Sullivan, joined as always by the other co-host, Mr. Jonny Rickard. I say as always. I wasn't here last week.
Yeah, man.
How are you? How are you, sir?
I'm good. Yeah, we felt your absence last week. You know, like you have a way of like asking questions that I tried to emulate that, and yeah, I did my best. So
you did amazing. I watched a few minutes of it. I was I'm sure you mentioned this before I joined, and watched a few minutes, probably halfway through. But so last week we were just talking about this before we started. Like Monday, I woke up, I was basically fine. By Monday afternoon, I had this super obnoxious sinus thing going on.
yeah,
And Tuesday, when I woke up, I basically couldn't talk without having a coughing fit. And so I spent all day Tuesday trying to find the right cocktail of decongestants and antihistamines. Actually scheduled a doctor's appointment, and my partner, who's in the healthcare industry, she was like, "Yeah, you don't need to go. Like they're not going to do anything for you. Like this is clearly a viral thing. Like what are you going to do? Lie to them and they'll give you antibiotics that aren't going to do anything?
Yeah. It's not COVID, bro. Calm down."
Yeah, she shamed me into just dealing with it. And so yeah, Wednesday it was kind of the same, and then starting Thursday it just kind of slowly got better. So now, here we are a week later, and I'm probably 95%, and only occasionally do I devolve into a coughing fit, and c'est la vie.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. I am glad.
Thank you. Yeah, it was slightly serendipitous because I wasn't able to join the stream, and I said I joined about halfway through. Well, the serendipitous part was they were actually doing a session. The competitive folks are doing a session that it was fortunate I was able to join and answer a bunch of questions and stuff like that. So
Nice.
It all worked out in the end. And then I joined in, and I was just quietly listening in. You did a great job. The ACM team, they're so easy. They're amazing.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's like having like Ortwin or Adele on, where they just like, all right, just go ahead, man.
Yep. So, Dwayne, thank you. I'm glad I'm okay too. I so far have survived 40-something years, mostly unscathed. Knock on wood. We'll hopefully we can keep that trend up.
Oh, and real quick, now that we've got a celebrity here, Mr. Dwayne. He is the lead of the Edge Special Interest Group in the OpenShift Commons, arena. So, congratulations, Dwayne. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. Glad to see that you're getting out there and getting stuff done.
Yeah. Edge is a big deal for us these days. Yeah. Edge, AI, they're two kind of core pillars for a lot of the stuff that we got going forward. I've spent most of the last, let's see, what is this, Wednesday? So the last 3 working days in sessions, meetings around Red Hat 1 and our upcoming content for there. So I've been very hyper aware of all the AI and Edge stuff that's going on. So anyways, yeah, it's good to be back. Good to see you. I feel like I haven't talked to you in a while. So
I know, yeah, it gets that way too, right? So we had like all of November, which is like KubeCon and Thanksgiving and all that stuff, and then finally getting back into it, and then to take another break soon.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I had a one-on-one yesterday with one of my peers in marketing, also manager. Like we were both individual contributors for a long time, and then we both became managers about the same time. And we were chatting, and she's like, "When did it become December?" I'm like, "Isn't it only like June?" Like, I feel you. I don't know what's happened. I was talking to my team yesterday. We had a team meeting yesterday morning, and I told them, I'm like, I hate to say this, but it's going to be kind of a rush to get through February, because we've got, for any Red Hatters who are watching, right, Red Hat 1, which is our internal, sales kickoff tech exchange conference. So there's 4 weeks of that in January, February. And then I think we've got a couple of weeks, and then there's IBM Tech, and then we've got a month and a half, and there's Red Hat Summit, and then suddenly it's June again. So
it's when people are like, well, how long? I'll have somebody come over and look at something, right? Like whatever, like a fireplace or whatever. They're like, well, how long you been having problems? I'm like, dude, I'm the wrong person to ask. My sense of time is so freaking like diluted. Like I have no idea. Like everything's been like a week or two, like, but it's been like
Yep.
months.
Yep. Yeah, I realized that this morning. So my garbage disposal broke, and so I keep. This was Saturday. I keep forgetting to send the text message that says, "Hey, the disposal is broke. Do you want me to just go ahead and replace it?" Here it is Wednesday. So I
Yeah.
currently have a reminder in my phone for after 3 minutes. You guys coming for IBM Tech Exchange? I don't know yet. So IBM Tech, which is in February or March, I think it's in March. I don't know that from my team's perspective, we have set who will be attending. I say that so we have. I think we know who will be attending like as attendees, but we haven't determined who will be attending as speakers. So we'll have to find out about that. I suspect it won't be until probably January that we'll have the content identified, and once we have the content identified, we'll assign speakers and all that other stuff. Oh, in January? No, I know I won't be going. I'm not sending anyone from my team. Barcelona. I haven't been to Barcelona in a few years. So the last time I went to an IBM Tech Exchange was 2019 when it was in Vienna. I'm sorry, 2020 when it was in Vienna. And that was the last place I traveled before COVID shut the world down. So
Nice.
Yeah, Vienna in January is chilly, shall we say.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's cold. Yeah.
So R208, I see your question here about troubleshooting the garbage collector. I guess my first question would be, have you done any changes, any modifications to the garbage collection that happens? So it could be a number of different things that are happening. By default, garbage collection, if we're talking about on nodes, it's the thing that goes through and, among other things, cleans up like unused container images. So I've seen errors, I've seen issues with this for any number of different reasons, ranging from literally all of the container images are in use and it cannot free any of them to free up space, and therefore it's angry because it really wants to free up space, to just things like I wouldn't say permissions issues, but rather, there was one random one where it was basically a permissions issue. Like somebody had debugged into the system in order to fiddle with something, and it caused garbage collection a bunch of heartache. So if you have any log messages, if you have anything that helps provide some more context, that would be useful. I don't remember which namespace that runs in, but you should be able to check the pods there, or I'm sorry, the cron job logs there, and be able to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So we kind of rambled here for not quite 10 minutes, Johnny. Top of mind topics, and I don't know what we covered last week and what we didn't. So I'm heavily depending on you for today.
Yep. So just a reminder with 4.14, we're starting the deprecation process of deployment configs. So deployment configs will still be in OpenShift, but it would be a lot like templates where you can still use them. You're more than welcome, but they're pretty much going to be in maintenance mode. So ideally, you'll want to start migrating to deployments, and that's really the preferred path for your application deployments, is to actually use the Kubernetes deployment. And then there's a very nice blog on disconnected OpenShift, and I'm going to paste the link. I was reading through it last night and this morning, and they cover a lot of ground. So what they're doing is they're doing a disconnected install with the agent installer, and so basically collecting all the information, bundling it up in an ISO, and then deploying. So I think that this might be a pretty good stream topic one day. Just go through this blog and just, all right, let's go step by step and just kind of knock it out, since we've already got it documented basically.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I, we periodically revisit these things, and one of the first streams you did was the disconnected deep dive, but that was 2 years ago.
Feels like it, yeah.
We've talked before about doing basically revisiting disconnected, and instead of doing it within our normal 1 to 2 hour stream, finding a day where we can spend 6 or 8 hours and really going through all of the different processes and procedures and stuff like that. I admit at this point it's been so long since I did disconnected that I don't know how much help I can be anymore.
I know.
The advantages or disadvantages, depending on your perspective of being a manager. We've also at one point we had talked about doing an installer marathon. Of taking again like 8 hours, and let's see how many different ways and different platforms we can install OpenShift on. I think the problem with that, and it's funny, I'm going to try and show a slide today that looks at, it was hidden in the original What's New in OpenShift 4.14 presentation.
Hmm.
It shows all of the different platforms and all of the different methods that you can install OpenShift on. And it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm showing my age, I just crossed 5 years here at Red Hat back in August. So when OpenShift 4.1 shipped, the first GA version of OpenShift 4, there was like 3 platforms. And
I know, it's crazy, dude.
so, here we are at 4.14 and, never. And there's some exciting news on that as well with the platform external, which is interesting. So we'll talk more about that here once we get into today's topic. So, so I've got one topic here. I think it got carried over unless you talked about it last week, which is the how to skip validation. So what I will do, that won't work. Plug this in here. I'd say I'm going to share this window, but it's going to be difficult with me. And let's do this. I should have thought ahead on this, but hindsight is always 20/20, right?
Every time.
Let's see. Let's log in here and plug this in and do this thing. So I have a cluster. In my cluster, I was going through the process of upgrading it, and at some point, some cache thing, happened, and it resulted in my browser, the console, just not working, and I haven't had time to reset or reload the browser because I've got 400 tabs open and have been in meetings nonstop. So
yeah, dude. So yesterday I forgot to. Well, I'm not gonna say I forgot. I updated the certificates from Let's Encrypt on Monday afternoon, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm good to go. I updated the API cert and the Ingress cert. Well, it didn't do it, and so yesterday, like, the cert expired and like the dashboard was completely dead. Like, you couldn't. It's impossible to get in, especially if you're using like OAuth and anything. I was like, holy crap, this sucks.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up this one. So as I said, I was going through and I was updating a 4.13 cluster to 4.14. And what I encountered in the lab instance that I had pulled was essentially there was a machine config that was not matching what was on disk. So the machine config, actually, do I have this up anywhere? Can I? No, I don't have it over here. So the machine config was just like creating a file. It was an ifconfig script and setting it to be empty. And then nmstate had come in afterwards and changed the contents of that. So it was just angry because, machine config wasn't matching the expected state. So it took me a minute to dig through and find this, where effectively you log in, debug into the node, and then you touch this file, and then you do this kick off the machine config daemon force, and it goes through and basically forces it to go through and apply the update. So ignore all of those errors, ignore this mismatch thing, just go through and apply it. So this came in pretty handy, even though it was slightly obnoxious, even on my small 3-node cluster, to have to go through and log in and touch each one of those things. But it is one way that you can force a machine config to reconcile, even if those files don't match or there are other errors that might be happening inside of there. So
wow.
I thought that was interesting. And it took me a surprising amount of time to find that. We'll post this link here into chat if you did not already. Nope, doesn't look like it. So yeah, that was my experiment or my learning experience for the day late last week when I was going through and updating everything and getting hands-on with 4.14, or more hands-on with 4.14, I should say. And something is making an awful lot of noise in the background here.
Nice. Yeah, I think last week I just spent a lot of time I updated to 4.14, and then we're using HyperShift on my team, so I updated the MCE when ACM dropped 2.9, and it's pretty cool. So if you are using HyperShift and you're updating to the latest multi-cluster engine, the CLI changed from HyperShift to HCP. And then they've done a couple other improvements. Like one of the big ones is like in 2.8, the clusters didn't get automatically imported into ACM.
Mm-hmm.
But now when you create the cluster with 2.9 and the MCD 2.4 or whatever, now when you generate a new hosted cluster, it gets imported automatically into ACM. So now you get like all the ACM GitOpsy goodness, if you wanted to take advantage of it from like an automation standpoint.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But ACM is still not required to use hosted control planes, right? You can
100%
still,
correct. Yeah.
you can still do it just with multi-cluster engine, which is a
Yep.
part of OpenShift, not ACM.
Yep. Exactly.
Planning to add a feature to delete all CRDs cleanly. Sometimes Windows will force a CRD delete and then leave custom resources hanging when applying a new version. I don't know about that. We should probably ask. I don't know if that would come from the OLM folks. I wouldn't think so.
I think this comes from the layered operator group, right? The people that deploy the operator, because they have to put in the cleanup facility.
Missed an opportunity. I can't believe the marketing guys missed an opportunity to call it Red Hat Cubed. Oh, for Red Hat 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have many thoughts on the various marketing terms that we choose to use. There's actually, for any internal Red Hatters, we actually have a big list of official product names that we're allowed to use, as well as abbreviations, which is always an interesting read. Because sometimes the marketing people and legal have very strong opinions on what we should and shouldn't call things. So, okay, thank you, Gerald, for pointing that out for OLM in 4.14, asking about deleting resources. I haven't encountered what you're saying, David. So I'm not entirely sure where that might come in. I would ask if you have specific examples. Go ahead and send them an email to Jonny and/or I, and then we'll talk with the operator team, the OLM team, and see if we can get some more details there, because they're all kind of related in that respect. So today's topic is, as the hopefully you can see on whatever streaming platform you're watching us on, OpenShift 4.14. So 4.14 came out a month ago, I think, Jonny. Right about a month ago. It was right before KubeCon, which was back in the beginning of November. So OpenShift 4.14 shipped about a month ago, but with holidays and other pre-existing topics and everything else, it's taken us a little bit of time to get here. I think that's probably okay. You all, please, let us know if you have if you disagree with us. But I say that because most folks don't update right away. So it takes, if you're using the stable upgrade channels, it takes typically between 45 and 60 days, I think up to 90 days sometimes, for the promotions, for upgrade promotions to happen. That being said, if you want to upgrade right away, you can absolutely do that using the fast channel, and it is fully supported. Right. The difference between fast and stable is simply the amount of time and data that has been collected against all of the different installs, upgrades, everything that's happened. And when the team that's responsible for those feels confident that the vast majority of cases are going to succeed. That's not really fair. I think they always think that the vast majority of cases are going to succeed, but they have confidence that 99.99%, or I'm sure they don't put it that way, but they watch that very closely. So there's a ton of stuff that goes into making sure that when it is in the stable upgrade channel, it is truly a reliable and stable and predictable upgrade path. But that doesn't mean that fast isn't going to be a good experience and that it isn't fully supported if you do fast. Let's see. And David, thank you. We appreciate the kind words. And don't ever hesitate to ask questions, reach out, anything like that. I can take no credit, by the way. I blame Jonny. Johnny's the one. He's far more technical these days than I am.
Don't be shy, David.
But yeah, thank you. So OpenShift 4.14, it is generally available. You can deploy new clusters today using 4.14 right out of the box. You can upgrade using the fast channel, but it'll still be a little bit of time before it reaches the stable upgrade channel. And then for connected clusters, not everybody has connected clusters, but we can see some telemetry around that, and we know it takes some time for folks to migrate. I'll also remind folks that 4.14 being an even numbered release means that it's an EUS. So that means it'll have 24 months of support. It also means that you can do an accelerated update from 4.12 to 4.14 if you're using the EUS channel. So just a reminder there. I got distracted by that. Just a reminder there that if you do that, the process is effectively to pause the machine config pools for the worker nodes, for the compute nodes, and then you update the control plane from 4.12 to 4.13 to 4.14 in the normal way. And then you unpause the compute node machine pools, and then they do a single reboot from 4.12 to 4.14. So the control plane still has to go through the process. We've talked about in previous episodes, there's API changes that happen in 4.13. There's other things that happen. So it's always a linear upgrade for the control plane. But compute nodes can jump. And that's a Kubernetes thing. You can do up to 2. The reason why it's limited to even numbers, you can only go like 12 to 14 or 10 to 12. It's a Kubernetes API thing. So they only guarantee compatibility for 2 versions backwards. So yeah.
Nice.
That being said, so yeah, we're going to spend some time talking about 4.14 stuff. I'm going to pull up the slides from the what's new when the PM team did it and kind of poke at a few things. Johnny's got a few things to poke at as well. But yeah, don't hesitate to ask any questions. This is, an office hours live stream. So Johnny and I are here to answer any and all questions that you may have, whether or not it's about 4.14. If you have roadmap questions, we'll do our best to answer those. We'll probably point you at the What's Next session that happened a few weeks ago as well. If you have other hard questions, stuff like that, ask them. Ask away. We'll do our best to answer those. If we can't answer them, you can always reach out to us via email. You see both of our email addresses there on the screen, Jonny, Jonny, at redhat.com, or Sully, Sully, at redhat.com. Feel free to reach out to us. We're also on the Kubernetes Slack. There's an OpenShift users channel there. So yeah. Let's see. Just looking at chat here. 4.14 supporting stretch clusters, recommended approach for DR. So we have never not supported stretched clusters in OpenShift 4. So first, what is a stretch cluster? So a stretch cluster is where we are putting kind of nodes for the OpenShift cluster across 2 or more sites. So Andrew's perspective, Jonny, I'm gonna speak for you and say that Jonny agrees that 2 sites doesn't really bring you any benefit, because the control plane always has an odd number of nodes. 3 is the number for OpenShift. So you're always going to have one site that has 2 of those nodes, which means it has the quorum. So if that site fails, you're still, your cluster is at a standstill. The workload on the surviving nodes would continue to run, but until you get a second control plane node recovered on that surviving site, you wouldn't be able to restart workload or anything like that. So they've always been supported. There are some constraints around it for latency, for things like network, to ensure that etcd can function the way it needs to. All the other requirements. There's a KCS, now that I think about it. Let's see if I can dig up that KCS and if it's still valid. But yeah, my personal opinion, again, DR with OpenShift and stretch clusters is not the best idea. It's technically possible. It does work. I know there's customers who are doing it. Having done it previously, you can encounter scenarios where it's what I call a death by 1,000 paper cuts scenario. Right? There's just so much more infrastructure with 2 or 3 or more sites where you end up with WAN blips, or you end up with this site having storage latency, or you end up with this happening over here, or just random things like that cause all kinds of stuff to happen across the cluster that lead to just less reliability. But if you're okay with that, if you're okay with the risk and okay with those quirks, then no reason not to do it. Yeah, my personal recommendation for disaster recovery is to have 2 sites, distinct clusters across those sites. So Protect the workload, don't protect the cluster, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Possible and efficient to virtualize OpenShift with Proxmox. Yes, possible, but and efficient as Proxmox is, but it would not be supported in that example. So OpenShift, I'm going to share my tab again here. Let's see, share screen, window, this one. So if we go to docs.openshift.com and we look at the 4.14 docs, so when you look inside of this installing subtab here, or even if you look at the installation overview, and I think if we scroll all the way down here, yeah, when we get way down here, there's all of these different platforms for infrastructure. So all of these are platforms, infrastructure platforms that we have explicit installation, testing, validation, and I'll even say support for from the OpenShift team. So if you go in and you're installing to AWS, because AWS is named inside of the documentation here, that means that in the CI systems that engineering uses, right, they're constantly testing and validating and verifying that when you install using, whatever method, IPI, UPI, et cetera, against AWS, we ensure that it works. However, OpenShift is also supported for any platform that is a RHEL certified hypervisor. For example, you'll notice that Hyper-V is not in this list here. However, if I go and so let's search for RHEL certified hypervisor. And is this the one I want? Nope. Certified, I think it might be this one. Yeah, so if I come all the way down here in this one, third-party hosts. So you could see Microsoft, so Hyper-V. So Hyper-V is a certified hypervisor for RHEL, which means that even though it's not an integrated, tested platform for OpenShift, OpenShift is still supported on that platform. You just install it as a non-integrated or platform agnostic, platform none. Where is it down here? Installing on any platform, you would use this particular method. So Proxmox, you can absolutely use this install on any cluster, installing a cluster on any platform method to install, to get the cluster deployed, get it up working, all that other stuff. And it'll behave more or less as you'd expect, but it would not be supported from Red Hat. Let's see.
This is a good question.
Okay.
I just blasted up here.
Top 3 coolest features you think most folks are not aware of in 4.12 through 4.14. I don't know. That's a good question.
I've been sitting there trying to come up with a clever answer, and I can't really think of one.
I mean, it's hard to say, and I say that because there is so much that happens inside of OpenShift, and it really depends on your perspective. So, for example, one of the coolest things that I think has happened in 4.14 is adding NM state, CRDs, NM state configuration into the GUI. Because previously you had to do it by YAML. It was kind of a pain. Even now, you still have to understand the mental map of NM state to NM network manager config and stuff like that. But it's so much easier now. And I spend a lot of my days in bare metal recently. So, is that a cool feature? Maybe, maybe not. You look at all the different stuff that's happened across all the various versions. There's so much. And let's see, GitOps, I think, is one that a lot of people are aware of, but they don't invest the time to get to know really well. I know we, Red Hat, are investing a lot of time, effort, and energy into GitOpsing all of the things, or at least making them compatible with GitOps. So I think a lot of people are aware of it, but they don't invest the time in it to go and, learn it, to use it, and stuff like that. And it's a super powerful tool. Let's see, what else would there be, Johnny?
Like the Scupper, like the Red Hat Service Interconnect stuff, right? Like all the stuff that we're doing to connect the cloud to the edge and the edge to the cloud, right?
Yep.
I think I think since 4.11 maybe, or maybe 4.12 actually 4.12 is when a lot of that stuff really started, becoming Main Street and getting out there. And then one of my favorite things right now is Hypershift. Like it is such a cool project, and like we've talked about
Yep.
it for a long time, Andrew, and like we were just kind of like chomping at the bit for them to finally release it, and when they did, it's like yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that.
See, Ovian Kubernetes is another one.
Yep.
So 4.12 Ovian Kubernetes became the default SDN with OpenShift. Just ton of features, ton of stuff that's happening there. So another thing that just happened in OpenShift 4.14, they added Ovian secondary networks. So if you are using OpenShift virtualization, you can now create Ovian secondary networks and attach virtual machines to those where they have basically a private SDN where they can talk to each other. And just lots of other cool features like that. You don't have to use it only with OpenShift virtualization. You can use that for any pods if you so choose. But
Gerald just called something out that I actually just came across this morning was with OC login. You can use -- web.
oh yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that.
that's pretty
That's a good
cool.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's particularly useful if you don't want to provide a token or any other kind of credential thing on the CLI. So if you're on, your from your desktop, you do the -- web, and when it goes to log into the system, it pops open the browser and you
Hmm.
authenticate through the browser, and then it pulls that token into the CLI session, which is
Yeah.
really awesome.
Yeah. If you've ever done anything like if you've ever authenticated to GitHub from CLI using
Yeah,
using the GH CLI or even like Azure, logging in Azure Cloud, they do something very similar. So
yeah,
I'm glad we did that. That's pretty cool.
yeah. So I see Nageshwar here talking about regional DR approach is better compared to Metro and Stretch. So one thing I will point out is, so Andrew's opinion, we don't do ourselves any favors by associating data protection, so regional and Metro DR, with OpenShift DR. So and especially the OpenShift virtualization team is bad about this, and I say that being a part of the OpenShift virtualization team. We talk about oh yeah, use OpenShift DR or OpenShift Metro DR with virtual machines. Well, OpenShift doesn't have Metro DR or it doesn't have regional DR. ODF has Metro DR and regional DR, and it protects those workloads, protects the persistent storage for those workloads using Ceph, because ODF is underpinned by Ceph replication. And then it uses ACM integration to protect the rest of the metadata surrounding, those Kubernetes, OpenShift applications. So I do think it's important to point out that OpenShift DR, we often think of as protecting the cluster. If I lose this site, or lose this cluster, how do I recover the cluster? I think that's very different than workload protection and workload DR, which can be implemented a number of different ways, right? You use your storage solution, whether it's ODF or Portworx or NetApp or Dell EMC or Hitachi or Fujitsu, or whatever. You protect the persistent storage and you protect the other components of those applications, other components being secrets and config maps and container images and deployment definitions and yada, 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 yada. Yes, I just yada yada all the details.
You can't yada yada that.
I knew you'd get it, Jonny. I knew you'd get it. They changed. I'm sorry. I'm just realizing that Restream changed chat. So now, even though I scroll up every time it posts a new chat message, it bounces back down, which is slightly irritating. So yeah, just be. I'm not saying that regional DR, Metro DR, one is better than the other. Stretch cluster, like they all have pros, cons. Whichever one works best for you is the one that works best for you, and I will not judge you. But I try to be very explicit when I talk about cluster DR and cluster recovery versus workload recovery, and even within workload recovery, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that, so it can get confusing. Let's see, 3 in Dart. Sorry, that made me think of my youngest child. She's in 4th grade, and the teacher sent home a thing talking about, instead of 3rd grade or 4th grade, it's Ford for RD, because they just changed the 3 to a 4 without changing the thing. That made me think about that. Anyways. ADHD is bad today.
Yeah.
Certified Red Hat OpenShift wanted an official guide to prepare first. So I don't know if there is an official guide that isn't, it would just be linked from the learning.redhat.com site. And they'll have like a list of, here's all the things you're expected to know.
Mm-hmm.
Any guide would come from like attending the DO 280, DO 380 level courses, and which are kind of 180 and 280, which are the two prerequisite courses for the DO 288, or it's a DO 288 exam.
It's 280.
Yeah,
I actually mistyped it and put 288, but it's 280.
Yeah, EX 280 is the exam.
Yeah, yeah. And I put the link to the exam objectives for the admin version. So
yeah. Let's see. Ravish, migrating from OpenShift cluster hosted on Rev to OpenShift cluster. Oh, I'm wearing my Red Hat virtualization hoodie today. I realized that this morning. Somebody called me out for it. OpenShift cluster hosted on OpenShift virtualization using HyperShift. Awesome. That just GA'd with 4.14 as well. I'm interested to know how that goes for folks, because that's something that I think a lot of people in Red Hat are excited about. Any best practices are supporting Doc for the same. So funny you mentioned that, Ravish. So there's actually an email out for any Red Hatters who are listening to the OpenShift SME group from the product manager, which is Adele, who's been on the stream before, basically saying, hey, let's crowdsource a bunch of experiences and reference implementations and all that other stuff. So if you have worked with, or if you have done anything like that, just look for that email from Adele in OpenShift SME. And for anybody who is curious, any Red Hatters, reach out to me or Jonny. We'll send you a link to that. So that being said, broadly speaking, I don't know that we have, and I say this, I believe that there is some guidance specifically for Rev to OpenShift virtualization migrations. I don't have that handy. So if you would please reach out to me, again, Sully, SULLY at redhat.com, like you see on the screen there. I will connect you with the right folks within the team for that information. It's usually kind of high level stuff. It may or may, like when you move to HyperShift with OpenShift virtualization for hosting your clusters, you gain some integration type pieces that may or may not have been there, depending on your deployment type with Red Hat virtualization. The way that you access things like storage might change. The way that you do certain management things changes with HyperShift. If you've seen any of our previous or hosted control planes, I'll eventually get better about using the actual
I'm terrible.
feature name. Yeah. So the way that you manage certain aspects of the cluster changes. So usually the big one that I point out to folks is the way authentication and authorization is done. It's managed from the HCP custom resource at the hosting cluster level instead of being done from within the hosted cluster. So super convenient if you're the administrator, the global administrator for all of your clusters, but different if you're, one of those, you're just one team that's using one cluster out of many, and you're used to having full control over your own fate. Is it worth for OpenShift admins to learn Ceph storage? I don't know. Ceph, I think it depends on whether or not you are going to be using ODF and the type of workloads that you're expecting to host in there. I feel like, I say all the time, OpenShift is a fractal. Right? For every question that you get answered, there are 100 new questions that pop up, and for every one of those that you answer, this just repeats ad infinitum. Right? Same thing for Kubernetes. Same thing for CoreOS. You could say the same thing is true for any one of the storage solutions that's out there. So, is it worth it to learn Ceph? Maybe to some degree it is, to learn enough to know, okay, in these scenarios, if I'm hosting this type of workload, right, multi-petabyte object stores, maybe here's some of the sharp edges that I'm going to encounter, stuff like that. Going in depth and learning a lot of the nitty gritty inside of there, maybe not, because, I'm sure at some point there's a level where you would move from internal, ODF to external ODF, or even a distinct Red Hat Ceph, storage cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. Do you have any thoughts there, Jonny?
You said my answer. It's like it depends, right? Like if you're using ODF, yeah, makes sense. But you don't. Even then, like you don't need to go and get into the bowels of it to understand it, right? Just the core components and like what. Yeah. Basically, like where are my pitfalls going to be? But yeah, for Metro DR, regional DR, like any storage provider that scales at that level and that supports multi-site like that, then I think that they would you would go and learn that, right? Especially if you bought Nutanix, right? There's no point in learning stuff, right? You'd go learn Nutanix. So
Yeah, and this is something that I'm starting to see within OpenShift virtualization, right? Because OpenShift virtualization, historically, we've kind of, I'm going to use the term ostriched
Hmm.
ourselves about storage, right? So ostriches, right, infamously stick their heads in the sand and pretend like there's not danger. I don't think that's actually true, by the way. I think that was something made up in like 1970s cartoons. But anyways, I have no idea. Anyways, so with OpenShift virtualization, we say, oh, your disks need to have RWX for live migration, and beyond that, use a CSI provider that can do snapshots and cloning, and you're good to go. But of course, it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Hmm.
However, all of those nuances are vendor specific, and it's like, I'll pick on NetApp because NetApp is the storage provider that I'm most familiar with. If you're using the ONTAP NAS driver, you can get however many volumes, PVCs, as your ONTAP system supports for FlexVols, and that number changes based on the physical hardware that you're using for your ONTAP system. But if you're using the efficiency driver, now you can have an order of magnitude or two more volumes because it packs more PVCs into the same FlexVol at the ONTAP level. But now there's a bunch of trade-offs as to where features like deduplication and cloning and quotas and like all this other stuff get applied. So, I've had a lot of conversations with our experts, in OpenShift virtualization, and they say, oh, well, we want to give guidance to our customers. We want to help them understand how this is going to impact them and how it's going to do that. And my response is, like, I feel like I'm pretty storage savvy, but I don't know enough to talk about any of these things authoritatively. Like, we have to work closely with our storage teams.
Hmm.
So to some degree, like, yeah, it's helpful to understand basics. Like when I was a VMware admin, I knew enough networking to be dangerous. Like I know what VLANs are, I know how spanning tree works, I know how routing works, right? That type of stuff. But you want to get into like how, setting AS, numbers and how routes are propagated and why we do this and why we do that. Like that's way out of my realm. And, I rely on networking experts. I feel like we have to be the same way. Sorry, coughing fit.
No, you're good. Like one thing with what you're saying too, Andrew, is like, like it's good to be big picture, right? You want to be able to see all the different pain points. Like, okay, if I'm having a problem here, where is that downstream for me or upstream for me? And then how do I talk? How do I talk intelligently to that person that needs to go and figure out like that next level, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm having a routing issue. Like, well, how do you know that? Like, so basic debugging, that type of stuff. But you don't need to go and like you said, I don't need to know the area numbers of the freaking route or whatever. Just go, here's my thing.
Know enough to be able to talk each other's language and know how to ask the right questions, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's the ultimate, answer to the Ceph question from before. Let's see. Babooni, any upcoming events for Hypershift on vSphere? So in the What's Next session, which is the roadmap session, those slides put the hosted control plane provider for vSphere in the second half of 2024. So I will point out that, and we've talked about this on the stream before, although it's been a while. So the way that the OpenShift teams do planning is they do it effectively 2 releases ahead. So remember, OpenShift releases approximately every 4 months. So that's kind of right on the barrier of things that we have actually planned into the product. So there's a chance that that's just we think it'll make it here, but we're not sure because we haven't actually planned that far ahead. So just keep that in mind. It's not in the product until it's in the product. Find stuff. I'm like, how did I not know about this? I say that all the time, David. I'm constantly finding new things about OpenShift. And Gerald, who is a part of my extended team, I think every time I talk to Gerald, I learn something new. So yeah. I feel that way half the time when I talk to you, Jonny. Like I didn't know it did that. And you're like a GitOps guru, right? And even if it's GitOps, Gerald is too. But even if it's not GitOps related, like you're in so many different places and so many different things, I'm constantly learning things.
Yeah. It's there's just so much, and like you can't pick it all up from just normal day-to-day stuff. So sometimes you hear it somewhere. That's one of the things I kind of miss about going on engagements is like you work with people and like they're doing stuff in Vim and you're like, whoa, what'd you just do? Like, back up a second. What did you just do? That was awesome. And yeah, I mean, I love it. It's it's just how you learn, so.
I still remember Vim. Vim is one of those. It's like Emacs, right? There's so many different keyboard shortcuts and everything. I remember
Yeah.
when I learned about the Shift ZZ. Like, what did you just do? How did you just exit out of that and save? And
Do it again.
Changes to OVN running databases on the nodes is cool. Yes, I agree. I think that's something that will also help dramatically with scaling. That was one of the driving factors with that. That was one of the things I was going to talk about as well. SSO user, big fan of OC login -- web. Yep. Let's see, web login. Yep. Easier way to enable FIPS. Sadly, no DC 901. It's still just it can only be enabled at install time, and once it's enabled, you cannot disable it. So, for better or for worse, and I don't know if that's a like a requirement of how and like the how to enforce or how the whole FIPS thing works, the FIPS paradigm works, that you can't kind of turn it on and off on demand. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, I mean on RHEL, I'm pretty sure you can turn it off once you've turned it on. Like I think you just enable. That's me guessing though. Like, cause I've never had to turn it off after I've turned it on.
Yeah. RHOPE 9 hypershift on hardware with virtualization like IPI, or is it on the roadmap? It's better than IPI. So literally, once you have that hosting cluster stood up, and you install, MCE multi-cluster engine and have all the CRDs that are available, you basically create, I think it's 2 CRs now. So one is for the control plane, so the HCP, and another is for the node pool. So you say, go deploy me a new control plane, and it goes and it stands up that control plane workload, which is just pods inside of the hosting clusters. And then it creates a node pool for that, or you create a node pool for that control plane that deploys the compute nodes. And those compute nodes can be virtual machines with OpenShift virtualization, or they can be bare metal servers. And it just kind of points them at each other, and it goes forth and does things. Like, you don't have to worry about bootstrapping anymore. You don't have to worry about like all of the cluster operators, bouncing around control plane nodes and how stuff comes up and down and all this other stuff. It's really cool.
If you want, I can show you how to do it from it's in AWS, but it's still hosted control plane. And now, so you don't even have to create the resource. Oh, I don't know about for bare metal though. But now you just run the hypershift CLI, and it does everything for you.
Yeah. I haven't used the CLI. I should probably get on board with that.
Yeah, I think in like the early version, you had the manifest, and you could go through and define everything. They got rid of that, and they're basically sticking directly to either going through the UI or using the CLI.
Okay. Let's see. Is Restream broken on Twitch? I don't know. I haven't been on Twitch today. I haven't looked. I hope it's not. But I know we're getting all of the chat from all the various places, so at least the aggregation into our platform seems to be working. Any supported way to migrate to or from OKD? Unfortunately not. Change the update graph tree thingy. No, I wish there was, kind of like we have the CentOS to RHEL, migration tool. But to my knowledge, there is not. We should probably ask that question to the product management team, though.
Okay, OKD to OCP or OpenShift?
Yeah. Any best practices to implement a virtual router? I'm curious what you mean there, Dwayne. Are you meaning like within the cluster to do like pod to pod communication, or like connecting VLANs together or something like that? Learn how to manage an OpenShift cluster. What is the cheapest option in order to do that? So that's a challenging question, I'll say. So I say that because the resource requirements for OpenShift are not lightweight, especially if you're wanting to learn how to manage the cluster itself. Right? If you're just wanting to learn how to deploy things, how applications work and all that other stuff, you can use the developer sandbox instances. And I think those stay up for a month at a time before they reset and stuff like that. So you can go in and say, let me see how I deploy my application and scale my application and manage these objects and do that type of stuff. But when you're talking about managing the cluster itself, it means that you need to have, nodes in the cluster that you can go and do things with. So If you have a Red Hat account team, you can reach out to them and basically ask, hey, can I have access to some resources, that I can get hands-on with? Typically, at least in my anecdotal experience, it's, oh yeah, well, here's a Red Hat demo platform, instance, we'll leave it running for 24 or 48 hours. So that way you can experiment with it. If you have resources of your own, whether it's a home lab, whether it's, a spare server at your place of employment, whatever that happens to be, you can register for a free developer account. So developers.redhat.com, register for an account. And that will give you access to OpenShift entitlements. So they are self-supported, all that other stuff. They are for single user, non-production use cases only. But you can go in and deploy clusters using that. You don't have to do anything to entitle them. It'll say trial. But after the trial expires, everything continues to work. And if anybody ever questions you about it, you just say, I have a developer entitlement. And I've kept those clusters running. I've had them in my lab for years and never had any issues. So if you don't have access to resources, and I say resources, enough physical hardware to get things up and running, it kind of depends on what you want to do. So things like, what do we call OpenShift Local now? Is it still OpenShift Local?
I think it's still OpenShift Local.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm trying. Well, it used to be called code ready containers. Naming conventions are hard. So things like OpenShift Local, you can spin it up using a virtual machine on your local, like your laptop or your desktop. CPU and memory requirements are modest, I'll say. I think it's 4 CPUs and 16 gigs of RAM or something like that. That gives you a single node, virtual machine instance, which may or may not be useful depending on what aspects you're trying to learn, stuff like that. So single node OpenShift, yeah, single node OpenShift you can use. It just depends on the experience you're going for. The management, if you're looking to learn, how do I manage a full size OpenShift cluster, single node OpenShift isn't going to give you a whole lot there. Managing machine config pools or managing machine sets and stuff like that, aren't really going to be there. Scrolling back up.
Yep. So we had one, just more of a statement from Steven. OKD to OCP could be, it could help developer adoption. It would also be nice for home labs. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear about the migration is it's not a one-for-one, right? But like you could use like the migration toolkit to get your apps and VMs over to another cluster, but it's not like the in-place upgrade or change from OKD to OCP. So
yeah. Let's see. Twitch looks like it's working. Thank you for checking that, Jonny.
Yeah.
So yes, RHOPE 9 hosted control plane, if it can use a cluster autoscaler. Yes, it's all managed from the hosting cluster. It basically, the two of them talk to each other and it triggers the hosting cluster to scale up the node pool. So all of that works exactly as you would expect.
Yeah, I was looking for the actual switch in the HyperShift VM because it will do it.
Yeah. Any SDN, so WAN, Dwayne, I think that's back to your comment about a virtual router. I would think that in theory you could deploy something like, FRR, one of the virtual routing things, as a pod inside of there. Think telcos, right? Telcos have containerized network functions that do this type of stuff, all the time. So I'm sure it's possible. I don't know of any of those off the top of my head. Me, I'm simple. I do home lab stuff most of the time. So I tend to use things like a virtual machine running, OpenSense or OpenWRT or something like that when I need to do that type of stuff. But I know that it is possible. I just don't know how to do it. And we'd have to bring on some of the telco folks to talk about that. Agent-based installer deployment from 726 Alpha 67. Agent-based installer deployment method had been refined to the point where installations in disconnected environments is straightforward. I think so. So agent-based, and I think we showed this. Didn't we demo this, Jonny?
Yeah.
So agent-based, the goal is I have a single ISO that I go and kind of pre-provide all of the information that I need or my nodes need in order to stand up a cluster. So long as you have the mirror registry that has all of the images and you plug in the right data, it generates the ISO, you boot the nodes, and in theory, everything just works. And agent-based was actually, so far as I remember, that whole installation concept was created specifically for getting cluster 0 up and running in disconnected environments. Because it was, always a bit of a hassle to have, prerequisites and all this other stuff. So it's mirror the images, from either the connected or disconnected side, create your installation ISO, turn on the servers, boot the ISO, and, 30-ish minutes later, you've got an up and running cluster that you can then deploy ACM and start using infrastructure environments and all that other stuff. So if you have other experiences, if there's, problems, issues, reach out to us. I don't mind at all to chat with that team. We've actually had that team on before. So when we talked about assisted installer, that is the same team, Rom Freeman and Company. So
I also posted that blog or reposted the link to
Yeah.
that blog that went through the disconnected steps for agent installer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, single node OpenShift is officially supported. That is correct. Yeah, there is, so Srinivas, no rollback to previous versions. So yes, that is correct. Still, I don't know if we will, in theory, if you encounter issues with, I believe it's ZStream releases, if you open a support ticket and get on the phone with them, they can help you roll back those. But because of the API changes and lots of other things that happen and minor updates, so think 4.13 to 4.14, I don't know that we will, officially support rollbacks in that respect, but I'm curious to find out. What is the process for node redeployment? Look like an event of a failure, and I'm assuming that's specific to compact cluster. So if it's a compact cluster, 3 nodes, effectively you do it the same way that you would do a failed control plane node. So this control plane backup and restore. So you do the replacing an unhealthy etcd member process. So if the node hasn't already been fully failed, you fail it, you remove it from the cluster, and then you add, follow this process for modifying etcd to remove that now failed node, and then you create a new node, or however you add a new node, and make sure that it has both the control plane as well as the worker labels, and then in theory, basically the etcd operator will automatically reapply those things. There is some work happening. I think it's tech preview right now, or dev preview for automatic etcd backups happening. And then I want to say in 4.15, they're also working on a dev preview for automatic etcd recovery to make this process even more simple. So basically you join the new cluster member and the operator just does it. And I think so. I'm interested to get that team back on the stream when the time comes. Let's see. I think we've caught up on chat. Did we miss anything? If we missed anything, just let us know. We love answering questions like this. This is why we're here. This is why it's an ask, an office hours stream.
Yeah, this was good.
Let's see. Do I have? I was looking for the what's new slides because I was going to use those as kind of talking points, but I don't think I have them in. Too many windows, too many tabs, too many different logins and stuff like that. So
Here, I'll share it to you really quick.
I got it. I'll just look at it this way. Let's see. So, Jonny, while I collect my thoughts, I should say, are there any of the things from 4.14 that you want to poke at or highlight?
I think the big one was just the there's a few big ones, I think, but like there's the secret store CSI driver, and what this is it's a tech preview feature that is it's going to basically put something in place that allows you to talk back to like another vault service, like a Amazon Key Vault or Amazon Key Store, Azure Vault, that type of thing, HashiCorp Vault. And then what it does is it generates a secret as a volume, and you would mount it in the pod, and when the pod gets destroyed, then the secret gets destroyed, and your data's gone. And the genesis for this is because like Red Hat doesn't have a great story around secrets management. Like we never really have, and this is kind of like our attempt at it. Now, like if you've used anything like external secrets operator or anything like that before, like this my personal beef with the secrets the secret store drivers. I wish we would take a really hard look at ESO and maybe do something about that, because ESO allows you to do templating, and it's a fantastic project. And so like when you're talking about backend compatibility, Azure, AWS, HashiCorp Vault, insert thing here. ESO is a great interface between that Vault service and then your Kubernetes cluster. But with that said, with that gripe out of the way, the secure secret store driver it's a good start. I think that like once we get some more providers in, I'll probably be a little bit less, hasty about it. But I'm glad to see that it's there. I'm glad to see that we've got at least something, as far as a secret store is concerned. I'd like to do a demo on it, but I'm not ready for it, because I don't have a key vault or anything like that set up.
Yeah. Here, I found the slide for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because, to your point, so secrets within Kubernetes, not just OpenShift, but Kubernetes, they're not secure, right? The data that's inside of them is just base64 encoded. So, of course, folks want a way to securely store and protect the data that's within those secrets, because, it's API keys, it's passwords, it's, all kinds of other things that your applications need. So I know, this is 4.14. I remember back to at least 4.6, we've been talking about ways that we can provide that, ways to securely provide those things. Historically, the recommendation has always been to use a partner solution, use something like HashiCorp Vault or something like that. So I'm curious, and I've been watching this, Gerald, I don't know if you're on. I know the GitOps community has always had a lot of interest in this because, with GitOps, you don't want to put things like, secrets into your Git repo. This is bad. So, how do we securely distribute those things and make them available? Automatic etcd defragmentation is available starting in which version? I want to say it was like 4.8 or 4.9. It started a while ago. So, and it, if I remember correctly, it happens when the node reboots, or at least it did initially. I want to say it was 4.10 or 4.11 was where it started happening on demand, as opposed to just when the node reboots. Custom domain operators in managed OpenShift like Rosa. I'm not sure what that means. You mean
I deploy my own operator in a namespace. I think that's what he's saying, or what they're saying.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I would have to ask the Rosa folks.
And then so the other one was just the standardized operator lifecycle. So to me, this is good because like when you're using things like ODF, right? ODF is very OpenShift release specific. So you have ODF 4.14, it correlates with OpenShift 4.14. So I think that like there's thank you. Thanks for the slide. Yeah, so you have the platform aligned, which means that like if the operator releases and it's platform aligned, then it's going to release. It's going to be the channel name is going to be 4.14. So like that way you always know, and then you'll have a list where you can go back and forth from. And that's important for like your government customers, your financial sectors, like the people that are really stringent on operator versions or software versions that are in your environment. And then you have your platform agnostic and your rolling stream. Rolling stream is you're going to have a single channel. Most likely going to be stable or latest, and then it's going to be freewheeling. And then with the platform agnostic, you're going to have it's going to be similar to the platform aligned, but there's going to be multiple versions, custom release dates, and then you'll have minor versions and stuff like that. So like basically the way it is kind of today, that's what platform agnostic is going to be. Platform aligned is going to be OCP or OpenShift specific, and then rolling stream is going to be whatever you get from the operator.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll notice, so one of the big things here at the bottom, for every supported OpenShift release, there's at least one version of every Red Hat operator in support.
Yep.
So yeah, there's some other changes that are happening as well, that I think we'll see over time with regard to operators and how they're shipped, and like further decoupling operators from the platform. The way that I think about this is, for anybody who was an Android user for a long time, right? You remember back in the Android like 3, 4, 5, 6 days, the vast majority of things were updated via Android operating system updates. And then over the last, like 10 releases, Google has been decoupling all of those things so that the core Android operating system update is relatively small. And then all of the other services, all of the other features and capabilities are updated through the App Store. I say this having not been an Android user in like 5 years. I'm pretty sure Apple's the same way. So I look at this as being very similar, right? We are, as OpenShift, the platform, continues to grow, and there continues to be more and more and more stuff, kind of, I'll say, we've used the term batteries included for a long time, included out of the box. There's also demand for, I don't need that. Like, I just don't want to include that. I don't want to deploy that. And, one of the things that we see is additional options with the composable OpenShift stuff. So if we come down here to this, so if we look at this, composable OpenShift is the ability to specify, like, I don't want to include these operators. So I don't want to include the console operator. This cluster is getting deployed out to an edge site. Nobody is ever going to log into the console, right? Don't even bother deploying it. Save those resources. I don't even want to have to worry about pulling update images for it. So we are seeing, at least from my perspective, more and more of those features become decoupled from the core platform, which I think is a good thing. It makes things a lot easier. It also allows us to do, updates on demand instead of having to wait for, an OpenShift release for that to happen. So yeah, looking at this list, console operator, CSI snapshot controller, insights operator, marketplace operator, node tuning operator, right? All these things that they're important, and they add a lot of functionality when you need it. If you don't need it, then sure, why is it even there? We don't even need that.
Yeah, the funny one for me is the OpenShift samples. I used to have to explain to people all the time, like it's because you go and look and those pods are airing out. And you're like, we didn't pull them in. Like, because when you do the mirror, you're only pulling in like the core operators. You're not pulling in the OpenShift samples. So yeah, it's good that you can disable those.
Yeah. Let's see. Upgrade. Oops, come on. So Srinivas, so you have a question there about determining the optimal upgrade path. So there is a tool, and I'm going to post it into. Oh, you already posted it in there.
Yep.
Thank you. Of course. Why do you hate me, Google? Anyways, so let's close that one and let's share a different window that I'm logged in with my employee account. So that way I actually have access to it. And we want to share this guy. So the link that Jonny posted there will take you to this page. And exactly as the name implies, it shows you the path to go from version A to version B. So for example, the cluster that I have been using in my lab started out with stable 4.13, and I was running 4.13.5. And I can look here and see all of the different options that are available. So there's no update path to 4.14. That's because it's not in stable. If I switch to fast, so let's go to fast 4.14. Oops. So I started on 4.13.5 and I want to go to 4.14. So notice here, this is supported, but may or may not be recommended depending on the following risks. So I can select this, I can click generate, and there's a couple of things that'll happen. So one, it will give me this set of updates that I need to do. So I'm currently on 4.13.5. I need to go to 4.13.25. And then from there, I can make the leap to 4.14.5. And it'll also point out that, hey, this may not be recommended because of these reasons. And I can click on this and it will tell me why. Right? So upgrades can get stuck on OVN clusters that were installed as 4.10 or earlier. So I can click here for more details if I so choose. But the point being, as the administrator, I can decide, does this affect me? Is this something I care about? Am I willing to accept that risk? Well, in my case, my cluster was not deployed 4.10 or earlier. So this didn't apply to me, and I could go ahead and do it. Now, this information, this right here, is also available from directly within inside your OpenShift cluster. So if you were to go to the admin console and select upgrade and select the destination of 4.14.5, it'll pop up this exact same information in there. And you can go in and say, yes, I know, I'm good with that, and tell it to upgrade anyways. But yeah, this upgrade path tool is super helpful. And you also notice that they added one for Rosa as well. Let's switch back to the other window. Is there any approach available to enable automatic ZStream update? No. And I you're not the first person who's asked about that, but I think the concern is even though ZStreams don't make any API changes or anything like that, the concern is, what if something breaks? What if this triggers at 2:00 in the morning and it results in an outage, and then you're angry with us because it automatically updated and you didn't want it to do that type of thing. I think you could, so that's from an official product, like tick the box automatic upgrades type of thing. That being said, updates to the platform are done just like anything else in the cluster. So you could create a simple script or a cron job or something like that looks to see if there's an upgrade available, and basically apply the patch the YAML object that represents the current version, and it'll trigger the upgrade process. So you can automate it if you so choose, but from the product standpoint, there's no checkbox or anything like that. At least not that I'm aware of. Jonny, I'm sure you have some ideas around how you could automate that.
Yeah, I mean, I just really just check the version that's out there and run the upgrade. It'd be either some curl or something like that to go out and figure out what the version is.
Did you just say Perl?
No, I would never say Perl. I say curl.
Curl, okay.
Yeah. No, I would never say Perl.
Let's see. There was one in here that I wanted to show that I thought was really cool. No. All right. Where is it? This is what happens when I don't write down slide numbers. Installer. Here we go. So this is the slide that I wanted to talk about earlier. So this slide shows all of the different platforms and all of the different installation experiences that are available with 4.14. And you see that it's just amazing, right? So like local zone, AWS local zones, outposts, see Alibaba's in tech preview, just all kinds of stuff that's available through here. You'll note that the only two that have, kind of across the board support are bare metal and vSphere, right? vSphere is supported across everywhere except for hosted control planes, which again, as we mentioned before, is 12 plus months out. So, it's always impressive to me to see just how much work and how much effort the teams have put into expanding the available platforms that are available. But I also think that this ties into, so you see this thing down here for external. So external is a really interesting thing that they've just started announcing with 4.14. And that's where our partners, so infrastructure provider partners can create their own integrations for deploying onto OpenShift, deploying OpenShift onto their platforms. So let's say that I want to use Jonny's cloud hosting service, and Jonny's cloud hosting service has the same set of APIs as AWS, maybe with some, minor tweaks or something like that. So Jonny can go in and basically, so I'll say fork the AWS cloud provider and make whatever tweaks and adjustment he needs, and then he can ship that and make it available to his customers. And as one of those customers, I go in and I specify, and now I got to find the slide. Again, I didn't write down this. But anyways, we can specify as those customers, where is it? Nope. that I want to use his external cloud provider with my cluster, as well as do tweaks. So as we saw with the composable a moment ago, like, hey, this isn't bare metal. Don't deploy the bare metal, operator. Well, I'm installing to Johnny's cloud, so don't install all of those other cloud provider operators. Instead, install my cloud provider operator. Here we go. I knew I'd find it eventually. So that is the value of these external platforms, or platform external, as you can see here, platform external, platform name in the example there. So it's not necessarily like Red Hat isn't going to come out and say, oh yeah, now we support XYZ as, Johnny's cloud as an external platform provider. Rather, it's Johnny is going to come out and say, hey, my cloud now supports OpenShift through the platform external provider name, and you can go and deploy and get access to all of these really cool things and stuff like that. So I'm sure we will probably, like we do with other things, keep track of those in some way. Like there's a list of certified CNIs. So I'm sure we'll keep track of that in some way. But to me, this is really cool, and it enables a lot of CCSPs and other folks, who are, they want to be able to host and deploy OpenShift for their customers on the platform that they have. It's a great way to enable all of them. So I thought that was really cool, and something that merited some investigation, and something I hope once we start getting more of these external providers, we can get one or two of those folks to come.
That's what I was just saying. I would love to see this in action. Yeah, yeah. And just kind of know, like, what did you go through to make it, to like get it working? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What was it like?
Srinikath, noticeable changes in ODF related to VMware vSphere CSI. Are you referring to ODF on vSphere? Like ODF deploying using vSphere CSI volumes for its data disks, or compared to vSphere CSI? And I will admit that I am largely ignorant of ODF. Let's see, David, you've only got one of your two posted there, so I'll wait till you finish. Izzy got a solution that adds a bunch of controllers into the Cube control plane, clusters capsizing pretty frequently in internal dev test clusters. How can we ensure that our solution isn't causing cluster stability issues? That's a good question. My typical, or my cop-out answer is monitoring. Monitor the cluster resources. I know that short to medium term, usually it's the API servers that encounter issues. So as you add things, and GitOps is bad about this, right? GitOps sets up a bunch of watches and it's constantly querying the APIs and stuff like that. And it adds a lot of, basically, I'm not going to say overhead, but it adds a lot of work to the API servers. And if you don't scale the resources for the control plane appropriately, it can cause, a ripple of issues. Longer term, I know that there is some work happening upstream in Kubernetes around the API server and how to dramatically reduce the amount of resources that those types of things consume. Jonny, who was it that was on the stream that was talking about that? Was that
that was the etcd people that were talking about where GitOps uses the watch. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you go back, I want to say it was 115 or 116 when we had the etcd team on, they were talking about that and how not only does it impact etcd and the resources it uses, but also the API servers and how that's going to improve that scenario quite a bit. So off the top of my head, not knowing anything else, and we can take a note to see, reach out to those respective SME teams to see if there's any suggestions, but, monitoring and sort of preemptively or proactively taking action to appropriately size, particularly the API resources or the control plane nodes for the API servers. Let's see. I don't know if we do have let me see if I can find a URL for that.
I just sent it. So I sent there's a blog that talks about onboarding new infrastructure providers. And then within that blog, there's another link that shows the official docs for getting there. I don't know if that's the exact answer that they're looking for, but it's pretty close. Yeah, and another thing too, like with OpenShift 4.14, they put in a new dashboard for the compute stuff. So you can actually go in, if you go under observe and then dashboards, and then click on dashboard, and then there's compute cluster or something like that, or node cluster right there. And so that'll tell you, basically, this is to give you like insight into your cluster to know like, hey, if I need to schedule pods here, do I have the resources available and stuff like that. And that's another big thing that I would say is pretty common amongst a lot of projects in OpenShift right now, is that the observability piece is getting big. Like GitOps, for example, if you install OpenShift GitOps, they put in 3 new dashboards. Network observability, they throw all their dashboards under this observe tab here. So yeah, lots of places where you can go and actually monitor stuff with like built-in filters and things like that. So you can take a look and see if that's what's causing the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't even seen these. The kubelet storage operation duration. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what good that does me, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I installed the network observability operator just to see, like, I don't have anything on my Hypershift cluster, so I just wanted to see what it was doing. And yeah, it shows quite a bit of detail, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm assuming that all of these are no data points found in my cluster because my cluster is not experiencing any of these conditions.
Yeah, most likely, yeah.
Nodes with system reserve CPU utilization above 80% and stuff like that.
Yeah. And Izzy, these are out of the box, right? So like as soon as you
upgrade
to 4.14, this node cluster dashboard, that's there out of the box. So hopefully that helps you take advantage, or hopefully that helps you figure it out.
Yeah. Oops. Let's see. Node exporter mix in. Yeah. I'm constantly learning new things. Clearly, I have not had enough stick time with 4.14. Let's see. Oh, vSphere static IP installs.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, this one was really interesting. Where'd it go? Sorry, I hate flipping slides so quickly on people. I saw it a moment ago, and it disappeared on me.
And if you guys, if you're looking through this and you're like, man, it'd be cool if they did a session on that, let us know, and we'll try and get the right people looped in so we can do a session.
Yeah. Yeah. So this particular thing here, so it is technology preview. And then what I really want to show is Rickard's blog post here. So literally since 4.5, when vSphere IPI first shipped, we've been asked if we can do static IPs with IPI. And so, here we are 10 releases later and adding a way that you can do that. So I will admit, I have not tested this yet. So this is really interesting and something that I'm looking forward to getting hands-on with. But you see, very much like we do with bare metal IPI and providing IP, basically network configuration information, we're doing the same thing inside of here. So if you see these little, 0, 1, 2, 3, this is the way that Rickard kind of included the little call outs like we do in the docs. So just be aware that those aren't, you don't need that in the actual definition.
Don't copy paste that.
Yeah. but you can see, like, here is how, it's creating and it's assigning IP addresses to those things. So if I remember correctly, the way that this works is effectively you have a role, and then for that role, you assign whatever IP addresses for a pool of IP addresses that you wanted to pull from. So for a, quote unquote, full cluster or traditional deployment, I need a bootstrap node. So I need to give the bootstrap node an IP address that it can use. I need at least, 3 IP addresses for the control plane nodes. And there's no guarantee that control plane node 0 is going to get the .5 address, and 1 is going to get .6, and 2 is going to get .7 in this instance. They might not be that way, but I give it the pool of IPs to pull from. And then the same thing down here with our compute nodes. And then moving on, so that's just for deployment. Once we get past deployment, we effectively create, again, pools of IP addresses that it assigns to nodes as it begins to go through. And Rickard does a phenomenal job of explaining all of this stuff and how it does the IP address claims and all that other stuff. But pools of IP addresses that it uses to assign to nodes when you do things like scaling up the machine sets. So I think this is really awesome. I think it's really cool the way that they've done this. I'm very much looking forward to see how this evolves and whether or not it gets even more intuitive than it already is. I feel like it's pretty intuitive because it's just like bare metal API, but yeah.
And the cool thing, the nerd thing about that is that you can template that out, right? You can make that either like a Helm template or an Ansible Jinja template, and then you can define, those three components or whatever many components, right? And then just loop over that through a playbook, and that'll generate your install config.
Yep. So yeah, this is one that I think there's a lot of interest in. There's a lot of people who are looking forward to that, and I'm, DHCP is almost religion at this point, for folks on whether or not it is or isn't allowed in the data center and what it means and all that other stuff. Let's just take that out of the equation. Whether or not you like or approve or disapprove of DHCP in the data center, now it doesn't matter, or in the future it won't matter. So super, super excited to see that one come about. And with that, while we're on the topic of vSphere, I'm going to jump up to this one. I did write the slide down. I got smarter as I was going along. vSphere CSI. So we've been talking about this on and off for a long time, right? So in-tree storage provisioning, storage drivers have been out for a while, right? So everything is moving towards CSI. And the result of that is we also have to do a migration for in-tree volumes to CSI. So the problem with vSphere specifically is there are, and you can see here, bugs in certain versions that make migration not safe. So the issue, if you will, bugs are present in those versions of vSphere. That's fine. It will continue to work and continue to be fine in OpenShift 4.13 and earlier. The bugs are specific to migration. So what we do is we block upgrade to 4.14, where migration is now mandatory, so that you don't accidentally, lose data more or less. So let me think of a better way to describe this. So in OpenShift 4.8 or 4.9 was when we first shipped the vSphere CSI driver as GA. So you could use that CSI driver, you can provision volumes, you can do all of the things that you would do with vSphere and CSI, and it was fine and great. In 4.12, I believe, we stopped, basically the default became the CSI driver. And 4.13, we enabled manual migration. So basically going in as the administrator and turning on migration and saying, migrate this volume from in-tree to CSI. And then now in 4.14, migration, so if you upgrade from 4.13 to 4.14, migration is automatic and mandatory. If you're using 4.14, or let me rephrase that, if you've deployed any cluster since 4.12, you're already using CSI and your volumes are fine. It's only if you had upgraded before or if you deliberately went in and configured an in-tree, storage class. So that's where this comes into play. So if you're deploying new 4.14 clusters, nothing to worry about. If you are using CSI volumes with one of these versions of vSphere underneath of, basically it will block the upgrade until you update your vSphere version. I don't know how recent these versions are. So I stopped paying attention to vSphere versions approximately 13 months ago when Broadcom, blah, blah, blah. So... which is it closed, so
yeah,
I'm the end of an era. My heart goes out to all of the folks at VMware who have been impacted. I have a lot of very good, very dear friends over there, and some of them have been impacted. So I'm sorry to see all of that. I know that it will also cause some consternation for customers as well. So eat your shorts, IPv6. It's been the year, much like the year of VDI, much like the year of the Linux desktop. It has been the year of IPv6 for the better part of 20 years at this point.
Yeah, but this is the year for the Linux desktop. This is the one. 2024. It's happening.
Vasco CCM, is that Cloud Credential Manager?
Cloud Controller Manager, I think.
I don't know. While you answer that, I'm gonna poke at a different thing. Let's see. Oh, this is an exciting one.
Yeah, cloud controller.
Okay. I don't know that I know the answer to that.
Just going off of like what I see from that blog, it looks like yes. But like without that's me just reading something and not having any in-depth knowledge on it. So, take it for what that's worth. But it says it's an actual part of this. The status is like it's got a cloud controller manager. So I would assume yes.
Yeah, it may also depend on the specific implementation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, I was just talking about ostriching with CSI and how we kind of, oh yeah, that's the CSI driver, and whoever implemented it's their problem. I suspect that it might be the same with these external cloud providers and which specific model they choose or not, as the case may be. So I brought up this slide to highlight the right-hand side, Cluster API. So it may or may not be well known that Cluster API and Machine API started out the same. And then it's been probably 6 years ago now, back when Red Hat was really earnestly pursuing and developing a lot of the stuff that was happening with OpenShift 4 that became machine sets and all that other stuff. We forked Cloud API to create Machine API. Now, there was a lot of both technical and I would say probably 90% technical and 10% political reasons for doing that. But it is what it is. So in the ensuing timeframe, effectively, the only people using Machine API are Red Hat. And we do a lot of really cool stuff with that. Again, machine sets and all that other stuff that are happening inside of there. So now, much like we see with like OVN Kubernetes being the default SDN, we're bringing ourselves back into what the rest of the community has adopted. So OVN or OpenShift SDN, great SDN, does all the things that we needed it to do, but it was a community of one, Red Hat. So OVN Kubernetes has a much broader community, right? There's hundreds of companies that are contributing to OVN. There's other products within Red Hat's portfolio that use OVN, not the least of which is OpenStack, the artist formerly known as Red Hat Virtualization. So the community was much larger. Without wanting to turn it into a competition, it feels like Cluster API is seeing much more broad adoption, and so we're slowly migrating over there. And you may or may not know this, Jonny. I know you know this, but hosted control planes uses Cluster API. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Node pools and all that uses Cluster API. So I point this out and bring this up only to point out that if you are a familiar with Cluster API, VMware was one of the major contributors to Cluster API, along with what is the company that they acquired that became Tanzu? Why can I not remember the name of them?
I have no idea.
Anyways, and you can see there, OpenShift 4.15 plus, we're going to start migrating from Machine API into Cluster API. And there's some details here on the screen about what that means and how do we update OpenShift as well as OpenShift functionality to use Cluster API instead of Machine API. So there's a non-trivial amount of engineering work that goes into that. But I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be really cool.
That's gonna be awesome. I actually watched a session at KubeCon on Cluster API, and they were scaling clusters up in I don't even know, like just thousands and thousands and thousands of clusters. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Let's see where to go next. Let's see. I thought this one was really cool. CoreOS layering on cluster builds. So this one, as you can see in the corner there, dev preview. So CoreOS layering is the way that we enable you to customize CoreOS for your environment. So the stereotypical or maybe cliche at this point example is I'm deploying OpenShift on the Jonny's hardware. Instead of Dell EMC, I'm using Jonny brand. Shady firmware and all. So Jonny's hardware needs a custom driver for the network adapter or the fiber channel adapter or whatever it happens to be, and it's not a part of the default CoreOS Linux kernel. So we use CoreOS layering, And with CoreOS layering, effectively you define using a basically a Docker file config. One of these is already the documentation. Here we go. So you use just a standard, Docker file, a container file format, from this CoreOS base image, because that's what this is referring to. Run these commands, rpm-ostree, tree, and add these packages to it. Add these drivers, update this package. I was recently talking with someone, they were experiencing, they were unsure why they were experiencing performance issues with their 100 gigabit network adapters. And I guess the only tool that they had available on CoreOS to test performance was DD. DD is not a network performance test. So my suggestion was, well, use CoreOS layering, install iperf, and or use a container image of iperf, and test at only network at the lowest layer that you possibly can to determine, is this actually a networking issue or is this something else that's happening inside of there? So you can modify that underlying container image. Historically, the problem with this was that if you did this, it was now your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning when you go in and, when I go over to, come down here to administration and cluster settings and, my authentication must have expired. Oh no, here we go. When I wanted to update my cluster, really, we're not going to, no, there is no newer version. So here, we'll go with candidate 4.15, see if anything shows up. There we go. So when I wanted to come in here and select like this, it wouldn't update the underlying CoreOS. So I would have to go in and I would have to rebuild my CoreOS image and update the machine config and do all of the things inside of there to update the underlying CoreOS instead of it updating alongside of my updates here. So what this change does is basically you add, where'd my slide go? Basically you define that CoreOS layered image build. So this to the cluster, you say, hey cluster, here's how I want you to build our CoreOS. And every time it does an update, it goes through and it rebuilds that and it automatically applies it for you. So it makes it dramatically more straightforward and easy to keep up with your CoreOS updates as your OpenShift cluster is also updated at the same time. So as we see on the slide here, dev preview in 4.14, but this is something that's really interesting and really exciting to me, particularly in those cases where we, are installing additional things to that underlying operating system. As we see more and more bare metal OpenShift deployments, literally OpenShift on physical servers, I think that this is going to be an interesting one, an important one.
Yeah.
We saw this. I'm an old school VMware administrator, right? So we saw this all the time of, remember, what did they call it? VMware has, and maybe they still do, it's been a few years, each one of the hardware vendors could publish their own ESXi image that had all of that hardware vendor's drivers baked into it. So I just go to the Dell website and pull down ESXi version blah, 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 and I use that on my Dell servers, and I don't have to worry about adding in all of the driver packages, after deployment and, my 10 gigabit Ethernet only, will only do 100 megabit because it doesn't have the right driver, and fighting through those things. So I feel like this is one of those things that's going to make life just that much easier for us.
And just from our other life back in the day, right? Like monitoring agents, right? A lot of those things you have to install, you have to configure locally so that way it knows how to call home and stuff like that. So this is where that's going to be huge, right? You can automate that build process and get that stuff in your images as you deploy.
Yeah. Is there openings for freshers in OpenShift admin? I don't know what that means.
I was trying to, I wasn't sure either. I was going to ask.
Fayez is talking to you about support case there with HCP defragmentation.
It looked like the automated defrag started around 4.9 where it was just like full on.
Yeah, but I thought it was only when the system rebooted. Because the expectation, and I remember talking to engineering about this, the expectation is we release a ZStream approximately every 2 weeks. So in theory, every 2 weeks, every node should get rebooted. But in reality, not everybody applies every ZStream.
Mhm.
And so what we would see is customers that would keep their nodes up and running, hey, we made it to, 4.10.7, maybe one or two Zstream releases after it made it to the stable upgrade channel. And now we haven't moved in 30 releases and we're ready to go to 4.12 and it hasn't been rebooted in 6 or 8 months. And there was definitely instances of stuff like that happen. So I think at some point they did implement basically when it reached a certain point, it would automatically trigger a defrag.
Yeah.
That was another thing that the etcd folks talked about when they were on the stream a few weeks ago, which is um, making that process more efficient and in particular non-blocking, so that when it does a defrag, it doesn't pause etcd while it goes through that process, which can lead to other issues. I've got just two more things here, I think. Two more? Yeah, looks like two more. Well, one and a half. Because one of them I already talked about, and that was OVN secondary networks, which is this slide. So, is it that one? No, it was this one. So, OVN secondary networks or secondary interfaces. So, again, I look at this as being useful with virtual machines, but it's really, you can use it with any pod inside of the cluster. So, hey, I want to provide my pods a way where they can communicate with each other that doesn't use the primary SDN. So we create a secondary, an OVN secondary network. They now have a quote unquote private network where they can talk to each other. And that includes doing things like defining, I believe you can define gateways, so that way they can access the outside world and all kinds of other stuff. So kind of interesting stuff that's happening there. And all that's functionality that came from OVN. We're just exposing, which is really awesome. And the other one that I was going to point out here is this NM state policy management via the console. I love how we include the markdown backtick code highlighting in our slides.
Creatures of habit, man.
I was just getting ready to say that. So what that's referring to here is, so I have NM state deployed inside of this cluster. So I now have these three options available inside of here. Excuse me, these two inside of here. So network attachment definitions gets defined with Multis. So node network state is the CRD for NM state that explains the current configuration, current network configuration for our nodes. So we did a bit of a deep dive of this back in one of the, I want to say 60s or 70s streams. I only know that because I recently dug it up. But from the GUI here, I can expand this and I can say, oh, show me the Ethernet, adapters that are on this particular host. ENP1S0, and I can see what IP address is assigned to it, the MAC address, the MTU. Right, I can click on that and I can see which network, or which adapter features are present. And I can even go into the YAML and it extracts out just that portion of the NNS YAML to show me this network adapter's configuration. Right. So I find this to be incredibly helpful when I want to know information about my nodes. Again, bare metal node management, this is just making it that much easier in that respect. Same thing for bridges. Like I can see there's a bridge on this node. I can see which ports are connected to it. If I switch over here, here's what all of that stuff looks like. So here's our ports. Cool. Yep. And I also think, so my opinion, this also makes it a lot easier for us to help map that, NM or a network manager configuration over into NM state and the YAML stateful based, what that looks like. So to me, I learn things just by looking at this and think, oh, okay, I want to create a bridge and the options that I have available to it, okay, VLAN default, VLAN ID. So 1. Okay. So if I want to have a different untagged VLAN associated with it, I can change that value here. If you want to create tagged VLAN interfaces, by the way, you use network attachment definitions. So I have BR flat here, and then I would come here to network attachment definitions and create one, call it VLAN 10, and it's a bridge name of br, flat, and I'm going to give it a VLAN tag number of 10. Right. And I can click create here. And now if I were to create a virtual machine, I would be able to assign it to that VLAN 10 network attachment definition. And that network adapter, whether it's a virtual machine or whether it's a pod, but it doesn't matter, but it would get attached to a port on our BR flat that is using, or that has VLAN 10 tagged on it. If I were to just attach to BR flat without assigning a VLAN interface, it would use whatever that default untagged value is. In this instance, 1. Hopefully that made sense. Slight tangent.
Yeah, it's cool because like if you're a RHEL administrator and you've used Cockpit before, right? Or if you're familiar with Cockpit and you're familiar with navigating through and kind of like, okay, let me go through my network interfaces and getting all the specs. It's very similar. Like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So how do we apply configuration to those nodes? So on the NNS here, right, we see that we have BR flat. Well, how did we get BR flat, right? BR flat isn't a normal bridge. So where did it come from? So we have an NNCP, a node network configuration policy defined that creates BR flat. Okay. So what does that look like? Typical, we can go in and we can see we're creating a bridge. We're going to attach port ENP3S0 to it, and we're going to give it a name. So that's great. I could always go in and create this YAML object and have that created. But you'll notice that there's a handy little form that we have here. So now I can create like, BR, bumpy, because it's not flat. And, what am I going to name this? We'll go with BR6 because I'm super creative today. It's a bridge. I don't want to assign an IP to it. What ports do I want to assign to it? So ENP5, what did I call this? 6S0. I can do all of the things that I would normally do here, as well as, I can add additional interfaces. And up here, I can configure a node, a node selector for it. So by default, it applies to all nodes. But maybe I want to have, role is worker, I think. No matching nodes. Yeah, I don't remember what the label is. Maybe. Explore node list. How handy. Roles. So if I click this guy and click details.
Oh, I have worker for role, yeah.
Yeah, but what's the name of the label?
It's like Kubernetes node or something like that. Yeah, node-role.kubernetes.io/worker.
Yeah, there we go. So node-role.kubernetes.io/worker.
/role and then worker. Or no, you're right. /worker. My bad. You're right.
Yeah. So there we go. Oof. So yeah. So you can see once I get the right node selector in there, right, it limits me to just my 3 worker nodes. So I can hit save and okay, great. Now I know it's only going to get applied to the ones that I want. And, there we go. So I click create and this is going to fail because there is that network adapter doesn't exist. So this ENP6S0 doesn't exist. So one thing I noticed doesn't exist here, there is no NNCE. Yeah, 2 failing. Okay, so this must be the NNCE. Yeah. So it's telling me, oh, look, you're wrong, you're bad, you don't know what you're doing, and telling me why is holding unknown port ENP6S0. And then conveniently, you'll notice NMState is relatively smart. So it failed on these 2. And because it failed, it'll actually revert that configuration. And then because it failed on those, it just said, nope, not even going to try.
Yeah, bye.
And then if I were to pull up this guy. So I'm pretty sure that this info here, as soon as it pulls this pod and starts it, we can see that on an NNCE. So the NNCE, and I'll minimize that while it's pulling and go about it the hard way, is the node network configuration enactment. And there is one of these that gets created for every node that an NNCP applies to. So you can see here, worker 1, BR flat. And this tells me about the specific application of that configuration for this node. So I can look here, and this will tell me what's going on. So yeah. So it does seem to be that information that we were just looking at in the other part of the GUI. So yeah, I thought that was helpful. A lot of folks, I get asked about this in the context of OpenShift virtualization and how do I do, host node configuration or host network configuration for things like connecting VMs to blah, blah, blah. A lot of folks want that same Red Hat virtualization experience. If you've never seen it before, it's think the graphical based, I have a quote unquote switch and I attach uplinks to it and I attach VLAN interfaces to it. And then I can, or VLAN bridges rather, and then I can associate those with VM network adapters. I don't know if we'll ever get to something like this. I feel like this is a pretty big win in being able to define those things using a GUI as opposed to having to use YAML. I'll take wins where I can get them.
The drag and drop stuff in Rev networking is just so cool.
It is nice. So interesting. So with Rev 4.4, they actually started using enum state behind the scenes.
Nice.
So in Rev Manager 4.4, you could go in and say, for this node, copy the network configuration and apply it to this other node. And it used enum state behind the scenes.
Nice.
Which
Very
is
nice. Cool. Yeah, I remember the first time I came across that and I was like, oh, you just drag. I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Like, you just drag and drop. I'm like,
yeah. Yep. Click the apply button. It goes in and it tries to do all the things. And if it doesn't, it reverts just like we see here. So yeah, it's our little baby's growing up. It's turning into a regular thing.
Yeah.
Get rid of this guy. I know you want me to confirm. Are you sure you want to do that? Are you really sure you want to do that? So yeah, other than that, I haven't had a chance to really explore in depth with OpenShift virtualization 4.14. There's a lot of cool stuff that's happening inside of here. So I did notice recently that they've been adding this and expanding this settings section out here. So things like, I can control the number of live migrations that are happening across the entire cluster. And I can choose here I've got a secondary network. I don't want to use the SDN for live migration. Instead, I've got this, I've got a dedicated set of network adapters. Well, I specify that here and it will direct that traffic over that network instead. This is a really cool one. Automatic subscription of new RHEL virtual machines.
Yes.
Oh yeah, plug in your information here, and whenever you deploy, so long as it has Cloud Init inside of it, or Cloud Init in the template. So if you pull the default RHEL cloud image from the customer portal, it'll automatically entitle it for you, which is super awesome. If you don't want to use this feature, you can still use Virtu and the docs for that. It's part of the RHEL subscription docs explain exactly how to configure everything for you. This just takes all of that and puts it into 2 GUI options. Super awesome. Yeah, I haven't, I need to, I have a background task of going through and exploring what are all of these instant types and what does this mean? CX1 extra large, when I'm creating these things, how do I use these? How do I apply them? What do they mean when I'm creating VMs? So I've been spending a lot of time with OpenShift virtualization here lately, especially after the Dell Apex announcements and all that other stuff. A lot of cool stuff happening there. Same thing with templates. I haven't digested all of this stuff. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I really need to dig in on virtualization. I haven't really touched it that much.
Yeah. I see your friend is speaking up.
Yeah. Somebody rang the doorbell, so now he's freaking out,
So yeah, that's I think that was everything that I had called up or pulled up from the set of things. I know there's some stuff. It's funny, right? Because you and I, we used to be able to go through and we would when we announced or the new version of OpenShift would come available, we would always go through and pick out a number of things and do deep dives on and all that.
Yeah.
We've been getting so many guests and so much other stuff coming on, which is phenomenal, and we love it. We just haven't
Yeah.
had time to do all these deep dives into stuff. So in the new year, I know we've got a schedule of things that we want to deep dive on and really start to dig into. But
Yeah,
this has
and
been so
I've been
fun.
taking notes too. So like everything, like a bunch of questions and things that seem interesting. Like I'm gonna update our little sheet so that way we have some more topics.
All right. Well, I think I'm about out of words. I only had one coughing fit today, so that's an improvement.
Yeah, you're living.
or not dead yet, anyways.
That's right.
So thank you everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate all the chat. Y'all have been phenomenal. If you are not watching us live, have not watched us live, or if you have watched us live and something comes to mind, don't hesitate to reach out. Jonny and I both love to get emails from y'all, so don't hesitate to reach out. You can, again, see both our emails there, JONNY or SULLY, Jonny or Sully at redhat.com. Love to hear from y'all. If you have any features that you're interested in that you'd love to see us explore and or try and break, we're happy to do that. Just shoot us a message and we'll do our best to get to that. With that, so next week we are hosting the Trusted Artifact Signer folks. Wow, that was hard to say. So this is one that I'm still learning more about. I think it's going to be interesting from a software provenance, software attestation type of thing. So something that's clearly very important these days. How do I know where this came from, and how do I know that I trust where it came from? So be sure to join us for that next week, December 13th. That will also be our last stream of the year. I don't know if we've decided if we're going to stream the first week of January. So technically we all come back to work. I think December or January 2nd or 3rd.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we'll stream that day or not. We'll have to call that one by ear, I think. But for sure, the second week of January, we'll be back on live. So yeah, that's all I got. Thanks, Jonny.
Yeah, man. Thank you. This was awesome. This is a great, thank you for all the questions in the audience. It really, the first hour flew by because we were just answering questions.
Yeah.
I think I love it. It makes it awesome. So yeah.
Yep.
Looking
Answer
forward
questions
to it.
is the best part. I'm trying to think. It's been a minute since I did this. Did I miss anything, Jonny? Anything in the closing here?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, you covered all the points. OpenShift Commons. If you're not part of the OpenShift community, that's where you would join. So yeah, they have a Slack workspace. It's like OpenShiftCommons.slack.com or something like that to sign up. So yeah, we're there. Engineers are there. We're trying to make sure that community stays healthy. So make sure you join in.
That's linked from OpenShift.org.
Yep,
is where where that all starts at. All right. Well, have a great week, everyone. Stay warm if you're in a cold climate. Stay cool if you're in a warm climate. I know it is approaching the hottest part of the year on the southern half of the world. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you joining this week. Again, if you have any questions, if anything comes to mind, don't hesitate to reach out to us at any point in time. And we will see you soon.